I never thought I'd sit in a crowded theater and watch the words I bled for spill out of someone else's mouth on the big screen. But that's exactly where I found myself, staring at my own creation, stolen and twisted into someone else's glory. The betrayal didn't come from a stranger or some faceless thief. It came from the one person I trusted with every draft, every fragile idea, every late-night panic about whether I was good enough. His name was Chester, and I'll tell you about him later, because you need to understand how someone so close could cut so deep. If you've ever felt the sting of someone you trusted turning your own dreams against you, then you know exactly why I have to tell this story. And if you haven't, I want you to stick around, because it might make you look twice at the people who say they're in your corner. And before I dive too deep, let me just say this. If you've ever had a friend betray you, if you've ever watched someone you love twist your trust into their own weapon, then hit that subscribe button, because I promise you what happened to me will make your skin crawl. My name is Bradley Drake. I'm a writer. At least I was trying to be back when this all began. Growing up, I never fit neatly into the world around me. Sports didn't stick, small talk bored me, but words, stories, they wrapped around me like armor and lit me up like fire. I poured everything into screenplays, not because I thought I'd ever get famous, but because it was the only way I could make sense of the world. Every heartbreak, every argument, every night I lay awake wondering what the point of it all was, it all ended up on the page. That's how Glass Kingdom was born, my script, my soul on paper. It wasn't perfect, but it was raw, it was mine, and it was the one story I knew could actually open a door for me. And Chester, he was there for all of it. The late nights when I tore up page after page, cursing myself for not being good enough. The early mornings when I texted him entire passages because I needed to know if they hit as hard as they did in my head. He was the friend who never rolled his eyes, who always said, "Keep going, Bradley. One day, this'll be the one." And I believed him. Chester wasn't a writer. He was the charming type, the guy who could walk into a room and own it without even trying. He was all quick smiles, sharp suits, always knowing the right joke to cut tension. Where I stumbled, he glided. Where I doubted myself, he doubled down. He said we balanced each other out, me with the stories, him with the charisma, and maybe he was right. I thought we were unstoppable, the perfect duo. I thought he wanted to see me win. Looking back, maybe the signs were always there. The way he'd ask to read the full script instead of just the pages I wanted feedback on. The way he'd light up when I shared a scene, as if he was imagining himself inside it, not just as a reader, but as an owner. At the time, I brushed it off as pride in me. God, I wanted to believe that. I let myself believe it. Months turned into a year, and Glass Kingdom started to take shape into something real. Draft after draft, coffee-fueled nights, rejection emails that stung but pushed me harder. I lived inside that story. Chester knew every corner of it. He knew the lead character's arc better than anyone because he'd listened to me agonize over every choice, every line of dialogue. He was my sounding board, my anchor. Or so I thought. The first crack came one night when I told him about a contest I was submitting to. It wasn't huge, but it had industry eyes on it. I remember the way his smile froze just a little too long. The way he said, "Are you sure it's ready? Maybe you should hold back, polish it more." I brushed it off as concern, but something in his tone made my chest tighten. Still, I ignored it. I wanted to believe he had my best interest at heart. He always had. Why doubt him now? I submitted the script. I didn't win. I didn't even make the shortlist. I told Chester, and he sighed in relief, like he'd been waiting for that outcome. He said something that stuck with me. Sometimes the world just isn't ready for your voice. I laughed it off, because what else was I supposed to do? But a part of me wondered if he was right. That was the beginning of the storm, though I didn't see it. Because what I didn't know was that Chester had already made his move. He'd already started whispering my story into other ears, reshaping it, dressing it up in his own words until it looked like his. And by the time I found out, it was too late. The night I realized something was wrong, I was walking home from my job at the bookstore, scrolling aimlessly through my phone to numb the usual sting of another day wasted outside my real dream. That's when I saw it. A headline buried in a local arts blog. Upcoming screenwriter Chester Paul debuts dazzling original script, Glass Empire. My heart stopped. The name wasn't just similar, it was practically identical. And the plot summary that followed? Word for word my creation, with slight tweaks that didn't disguise the theft. They just dressed it in a new suit and called it his. I remember standing there under the dim yellow glow of a streetlight, my mouth dry, my body shaking. For a full minute, I thought it had to be a mistake, some other Chester, some coincidence. But no, it was him. He'd taken it. He'd taken me. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to call him right then, demand an explanation, but my hands trembled too hard to type. Instead, I went home and pulled up the blog again, reading every line over and over like I was staring at my own obituary. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't even lie down. I just sat there at my desk, staring at my laptop, scrolling through every memory I had with Chester. The way he'd said, "Maybe you should hold back." The way he'd insisted on keeping copies of my drafts for safekeeping. Every moment that had once felt like support now burned like evidence. Still, some part of me wanted to believe there was another explanation. Maybe he'd pitched it by mistake. Maybe it was meant as a collaboration. Maybe, I don't know. I was desperate to believe he hadn't stabbed me in the back. So I did the stupidest thing I could have done. I called him. At 2 a.m, voice shaking, I asked, "Chester, what the hell is Glass Empire?" There was silence on the other end. Then, in that smooth, unbothered voice I used to admire so much, he said, "Bradley, calm down. You're overreacting." He didn't deny it. He didn't even sound guilty, just annoyed that I'd caught him. "I gave your story a shot of adrenaline," he went on, like he was doing me a favor. "You were never going to get it made on your own. You're too cautious. I had to sell it. I had to make it bigger. This is good for both of us." My chest tightened so hard I thought I might pass out. He actually believed what he was saying. He believed stealing my soul and stapling his name to it was doing me a favor. "Don't worry," he added, like some twisted cherry on top. "I'll make sure you're taken care of once the money comes in. Quietly, of course. No need to mess with the optics." Optics. That word echoed in my skull like a gunshot. That was the moment I knew. He wasn't my friend. He wasn't my ally. He was a thief wearing the mask of loyalty. I hung up on him. My hands were shaking so violently that I dropped the phone. And when I picked it back up, I saw his messages flooding in. "Bradley, don't be dramatic. This is for both of us. Don't ruin this by being stubborn." I didn't answer. I didn't sleep. All I could think was, how do I fight this? How do I take back what's mine without destroying myself in the process? Days turned into weeks. Chester was everywhere. Interviews, press releases, photos with producers I'd only dreamed of meeting. He wore my words like a custom suit, smiling that effortless smile while the world ate it up. Meanwhile, I was invisible, a ghost in the story I created. But here's the thing about betrayal. It cuts you open, but it also lights a fire. The more I saw him parade around with my script, the more determined I became. I dug through every email, every draft, every timestamp I had. Proof. I had it all. I just needed the right moment, the right stage. But even as I gathered my evidence, the doubt gnawed at me. Was I strong enough to go through with this? What if no one believed me? What if I became the bitter ex-friend trying to tear down a rising star? That was my moral dilemma. Truth versus survival. If I stayed silent, I kept my peace, but lost everything I'd worked for. If I spoke out, I risked becoming the villain in my own story. The close call came 2 weeks before the premiere. I was invited, of all things, by Chester himself. A smug gesture, like he wanted me to sit in the dark and watch him reap the harvest of my labor. I almost declined, but then I thought, no, if I go, I can end this on my terms. I can expose him where it hurts the most. Still, I hesitated. I nearly threw away the invite more times than I can count. I kept hearing his voice in my head, that slick assurance, that manipulation. This is for both of us. What if I confronted him and it backfired? What if he buried me deeper? That night, sitting alone in my apartment, surrounded by draft pages that suddenly felt like ashes, I realized something. I'd already lost everything. My reputation, my chance, my friend. There was nothing left for him to take, which meant I had nothing left to fear. That's when the plan came together. The premiere wouldn't just be his victory lap. It would be his downfall. The night of the premiere, the city buzzed like it knew something was about to break. Neon lights shimmered on the wet pavement, cameras flashed like lightning, and I stood across the street from the theater, clutching the envelope that held my proof. My name, my words, my timestamps, everything that tied Glass Empire back to me. My heart hammered against my ribs as I watched the line of black cars unload polished actors and grinning producers. And then there he was, Chester, dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my rent for a year, waving to the crowd like a king returning from war. The sight of him made my throat tighten, not with admiration like it used to, but with fury so sharp it almost tasted like blood. I waited until the theater was packed, until the lights dimmed and the screen flickered to life. I sat in the back, in the shadows, as the first words of my script filled the room. Words I'd sweated over, doubted, rewritten 100 times. And now they rolled out in a stranger's voice, met with gasps and awe from the audience. Every cheer was a knife, but I held still. I had one chance to strike, and it had to be perfect. Halfway through the screening, I slipped out and made my way to the lobby, where the press waited to swarm Chester once the credits rolled. My hands shook as I handed copies of my proof to a journalist I trusted, a woman named Leela, who had once rejected one of my earlier pitches, but told me she admired my persistence. Her eyes widened as she scanned the documents, then flicked up to me, sharp and calculating. "Is this real?" she whispered. "Every word," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She didn't hesitate. She tucked the papers into her bag and said, "Stay close." The final scene ended to thunderous applause. Chester strutted out onto the stage, arms wide, soaking in the adoration. He launched into a speech about inspiration, about vision, about chasing dreams. Each lie rolled off his tongue like silk, and the crowd drank it in. That's when Leela raised her hand. "Chester," she called out, her voice slicing through the applause, "could you tell us about your writing process? How you came up with the concept of Glass Empire?" He grinned, too confident to sense the trap. "Of course. It was a spark I had one night, an idea that grew into something bigger, something I knew the world needed to see." Leela's expression hardened. She pulled the papers from her bag and held them high. "Interesting, because I have documents here that say otherwise. Drafts, emails, timestamps, all belonging to a writer named Bradley Drake." The room erupted. Cameras flashed. Voices rose in confusion. Chester froze, his smile cracking for the first time. "That's ridiculous," he stammered, but his voice lacked its usual shine. All eyes turned toward me as I stepped forward from the back, my legs trembling, but my spine unbreakable. "She's right," I said, my voice carrying further than I thought possible. "I wrote Glass Kingdom. He stole it, dressed it up, and called it his own. Every line you just watched, those were my words, my story, my life." The silence that followed was thick, charged, electric. Chester tried to laugh it off. "Bradley, come on. Don't do this here. We talked about—" We never talked about you taking what wasn't yours, I cut in. You betrayed me. You betrayed our friendship. And you thought I'd stay quiet while you stood here and took credit for my soul? Not tonight. Not ever again. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The producers on stage shifted uneasily, whispering to each other. Leela handed the documents to another reporter, who scanned them quickly and nodded. Proof. Unshakable proof. The tide was turning, and Chester felt it. His confident mask slipped, replaced by a flicker of desperation I'd never seen before. He reached for me, as if he could still smooth this over. Bradley, listen, we can fix this. We can... No, I said, stepping back. You don't get to fix what you shattered. The cameras caught every second. The betrayal, the denial, the exposure. By the time the night ended, the headlines weren't about Chester's triumph. They were about his fall. Screenwriter exposed as fraud. Glass empire crumbles under scandal. My name was finally there, attached not just to the story, but to the truth. In the days that followed, Chester vanished from the spotlight. Producers dropped him, agents stopped answering his calls, his social media turned into a storm of outrage. He tried to spin it, of course, tried to paint me as a jealous nobody, but the proof was too solid, the betrayal too clear. And me? I didn't get rich overnight. I didn't suddenly become a Hollywood darling. But I got something better. I got my name back, my story, my truth. And maybe most importantly, I got to see the look in Chester's eyes when the world realized who he really was. Not a visionary, not a genius, but a thief who thought friendship was just another mask to wear. I'd like to say I felt triumphant, but the truth is more complicated. Exposing him didn't erase the nights I'd spent doubting myself, didn't give me back the months where I believed I had a friend in him. The scars are still there. They always will be. But so is the fire. And if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Guard your dreams, because not everyone who claps for you wants to see you win. Some just want to steal the spotlight when it shines. This story may be over, but the betrayals never stop. Like this video, share it with your circle, and subscribe to Chronicles of Revenge so you don't miss what's coming next. Another shocking story is just one click away below.